Hello and welcome to K-Pod, the podcast about Korean Americans and arts and culture from Korean American Story. The episode you're about to hear is K-Pod's first remote interview, which Juliana and I conducted over Zoom. It's our conversation with author David Yoon, who became a breakout star last year with his debut YA novel, Frankly in Love. The book tells the story of Korean-American teen Frank Lee, who falls in love for the first time and has to hide his girlfriend from his parents, who will only allow him to date Koreans. It's funny, romantic, and heartbreaking all at once. Like his protagonist, David grew up in Orange County, California, where his parents ran a liquor store. After college, he worked in graphic design before getting his MFA in creative writing, which is where he met his future wife, author Nicola Yoon. His parents did not approve of his relationship with Nicola, who's Black, and the subsequent rift it caused in his family is echoed in Frankly in Love. The best-selling couple are now parents to an 8-year-old daughter and live in Los Angeles. Juliana and I were so charmed by David, who exudes such generosity, kindness, and wit. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, David.
Hello.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
So where are you exactly? I don't even know where you live. Is it a house, an apartment?
I live in Los Angeles, California, where it's going to be like 90 degrees today, because why not?
Wow.
Yeah, and I work from home in this chair, actually, this giant fuzzy ball chair.
That's your writing space?
Yeah. Actually, I like dark, small, compact spaces for some reason, and this is where I do all my writing. And it's interesting, like since me and Nikki, my wife, we both write and work from home. The quarantine it feels familiar, but at the same time, totally unfamiliar. It's really, really strange.
So what are your days like? Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing the past month.
Running a homeschool. I mean, my daughter, she's 8, and her school's been really great about doing remote learning, but it's still a lot of work on our part. Stuff gets missing, and we got to print stuff out and keep it in a binder and make sure she's staying focused. So there's that. And then since someone always has to be with her, we have less time to write. That's really the biggest thing. Cooking all the time, doing dishes, like nonstop dishes. And it's strange. It's, we fill the time with work and school and maintenance. And the days just go flying by. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How have you guys been handling the whole situation?
Well, Juliana, aside from being a photographer, is an amazing crafter, and she has become
awesome.
This famous mask maker now. If you look at her Instagram, it's all these masks, and now people are contacting her from all over the world, asking her how to make a certain mask.
It has been a really bizarre year.
That is so. The
last couple of months have not been what I thought this year was going to be in January. I mean, it was, I just kind of sit every day wondering what in the world is going on, and just kind of take it all in. Maybe you might have experienced something like this when your first book came out. I know that you probably have PR people, but with your book reviews and all of a sudden people having read your book and hearing about you and getting excited. I mean, I'm assuming you were overwhelmed with followers and fans and people just wishing you congratulations.
It was crazy. I mean, I read somewhere that like one of the writer's greatest fears is for people to actually read what they wrote. And it's kind of true. It's terrifying you write it and you're just writing. I just write just because I love to write. But I never think that people are going to be reading this, so I'll give this to the audience or whatever. I just write. And so when I find out what they're pulling, people would start making those Instagram pull quote graphics,
Yes.
And posting those up. And that's super surreal, like seeing your words taken seriously, especially like growing up as I did. I had zero role models in media and zero role models in literature until college, until Chang Lee, basically. So to see that kind of attention on me, I'm just not used to it at all. And my parents were always too busy working to congratulate me on stuff, and they're just doing their best. So just at a deep personal level, it's very strange. But it's really validating. It's really gratifying. Especially nice is meeting kids and adults who aren't Korean American, who are like Turkish American or Greek American. The best is when they say, this could have been my parents just speaking Korean. And that means everything to me. That means that it connected at a basic level.
For people who maybe don't know what the book is about, can you just explain how you like to explain the basic premise?
You mean this book?
Yeah, perfect.
That is one killer cover, I have to say.
I love this. I got so lucky. Oh my God.
So did you have input on the art direction on that?
Yeah, my editor, Jen Klonsky at Penguin Putnam, she was super into it. And then she was like, commissioned like 3 or 4 artists to submit concepts. And this guy, Owen Gildersleeve, made this out of paper. You would really appreciate this, being a crafty person yourself. But it's paper cut by a medical scalpel, and then mounted onto foam board, and then layered and put next to a window, and they take a shot of it from up top.
That is fabulous.
This is actually
I love
a photograph.
That. It's all analog. Yeah. That's fabulous.
Really great.
I mean, who came out with the concept? The artist just decided that that's what he wanted to do.
Okay, full disclosure. I was a graphic designer. I used to work as an art director. I went into interactive and user experience later in my career.
Yes.
So I gave some design parameters.
I had a feeling. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, I don't want it to be representational because this is the world we live in.
Yes.
And I didn't want it to be heavily gendered. So no bright pinks and no bright blues, and kind of keep it in the middle so that boys will pick up the book. Because boys in particular have a neurosis about being seen with a girly book.
Yes,
definitely.
So I wanted to make sure that boys read this, and he just totally nailed it. I was so happy with the result.
It's beautiful.
So I got really lucky with it. I mean, it's a great package. It's beautiful, yeah.
What is the book about?
Oh, right, yeah, the story. The stuff in between the covers. It's about this teenage kid he has pretty traditional parents, and they have one rule about dating, which is you can date whoever you want as long as they're Korean. And he teams up with a family friend who also has pretty strict traditional parents, and they pretend to date each other to make their parents happy. And in the meantime, they date whoever they want behind their backs. So it's a fake dating story. What could possibly go wrong, right? It started out really fun and like a light rom-com. And the book is really funny, I guarantee you. But I found myself really going into issues of parents, of family, and of the immigrant generational gap, where you have these immigrants who come to this country and they have all their hopes and dreams, and they pin all those hopes and dreams on their children who don't necessarily understand why they're being expected to do these certain things. And there's a whole historical continuum that kind of gets erased a little bit when people move to a different country. And I really, really wanted to explore that in the context of larger sort of American racism. And so it turned out to be an kind of unexpectedly sophisticated story that I know a lot of like adults have also responded to. I think a lot of it was fueled by my dad was really sick at the time. At least for me, when my parents get really sick, it makes me think about when I was a kid and our whole history. And also I had my own daughter fairly recently. And when you have a kid, you really relive your childhood through her eyes. And so all these histories were swirling around in my head, and it kind of came out on the page.
It was so good. We loved it so much.
Thanks.
It was so, it definitely had that lightness and that funny, the humor, but it was so moving. As a Korean American growing up sort of in between, I felt you captured so many subtle things that I recognized that you don't have to be Korean to recognize, but they were there. I mean, it had so many little treasures like that. Juliana and I talked a lot about it.
There are a ton of adults out there who devour YA, and I'm one of them. And I really appreciate when there's more meaty stuff for young people, and then it's not all just like silly relationship dramas and the backstabbing and all that. I mean, you managed to pack a ton of content into Frankly in Love, and hit on so many different aspects of race and identity and family and the different identities and shifting identities. And I thought it was really fascinating.
I realized that, like, well, first of all, like Frank, the main character, I like to joke that he gets to learn in one senior year what it took me like 20 years to figure out.
Yeah.
So it's like, good for you, Frank. That I remember when I first learned about this notion of an imaginary country that all immigrants, not just Koreans, kind of bring over and then maintain.
Yes.
So my parents are still kind of living in the Korea that they left.
Mine too,
Meanwhile,
completely.
Yeah, totally.
And the country's moved on, and they think that girls don't smoke. Girls, I mean, they have this very old-fashioned view of that's how it's like these days.
Totally, yeah.
It's
and
crazy.
It happens across cultures, across, generations, and it happened with me. When I was in Japan, I hang out with all the other English speakers, just like my parents hung out with only Korean people in America, and we all had the same job. Just like all Koreans in America had the same job. And all our inside jokes and pop culture references were slowly getting stale and old. And meanwhile, America was moving on. And by the time I moved back to the States, I didn't recognize the culture at all. I was like, what is this? What is that? I've never heard of this band. I don't know what they're doing on their phones. Like, what's that app? And it's just crazy. I experienced that firsthand as like someone who's native. But the immigrant experience can happen to anybody. It's just a human experience.
So, we have a question for you, David, because we hear that you went to grad school, which is where you met your wife, Nicola Yoon. And then all of a sudden, many, many years later, you have this first book that's a bestseller and you kind of knock it out of the park. And we want to know, what were you doing in between?
I was an English junkie from when I was a kid. English in high school. I majored in English. I got my grad degree in fiction. But I also really love design, and that was my day job, doing first print design and then websites and then apps and mobile. The thing is, like, that day job, it was fun, it was challenging. I actually really liked it. I liked my day career. But at the same time, it was not that hard. It was challenging, but at a sort of easy surface level. And I knew this because whenever I would write, I would feel super frustrated and get really mad and angry and really work obsessively on the detailing. And I knew that was the hard work. And the hard work, as you know, is always the work worth doing. And I was really, really fortunate enough to have my parents who supported me to go to grad school. Yeah, and they totally didn't understand it. They thought I was nuts. I met Nikki and, we got married. I married like my first writing workshop partner. We talk about writing all the time and she was constantly writing. She worked in finance. I worked in tech and we were both getting up early and working on stuff, screenplays and novels and just submitting and getting rejections. And we just kept at it. Not because, we one day hoped that, we'd make the big time. It's because it was a compulsive thing. If we didn't write, we would become really cranky monsters. And then as soon as we wrote, we felt better about our lives and we were cheerful. So it's almost therapeutic, yeah.
Nikki became quite famous and successful early on, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like she kind of, before anyone knew your name, she was already like best-selling author. I think you were just referred to as an artist or something, the illustrator of her book.
Yeah, I was doing the illustration work for Everything, and I was thrilled with her success. Like because she'd been wanting this for so long too. And then, it did produce a little bit of impatience. It's like, well, I want to have a published book too now. But you know what? I consider myself really lucky because I really loved my career otherwise. She was working for the evil empire in finance. I mean, these were not nice people. She would go crying in the bathroom. She would come home and just like want to smash things. It was a bad scene. So I was thrilled that she got out. Any kind of like impatience that I had was vastly outweighed by just how happy I was for her success. And the thing is, like, success begets success. She understood what it meant to be a working writer. And she was like, you should stop working and focus on writing full time. I feel like I won the love lottery with her just because I knew so quickly that I was going to marry her. And then I feel like I won the lottery again because we are in the same careers at the same level at around the same time. And
it's amazing.
That's amazing.
And your books are side by side in the store. It's like, it's perfect.
It's cuckoo. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. And they echo each other in certain ways, would you say?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'll notice things that like she's written that kind of show up in my books, and stuff that I've written that kind of show up in her book. Because we read the first and every draft of everything we write. And so we know our bag of tricks, and I know all of her bag of tricks. Yeah.
So I guess, one of the big questions I had when I read your book, knowing you're married to Nicola, is how you told the story of Frank's sister, who was basically disowned by her parents, which might seem unbelievable to a lot of readers. But when I read that, I thought, yeah, that's how many Korean parents I know, maybe even including my aunt, might have behaved. It felt very real. How much of that came from your experience? I'm dying to know.
A lot of it came from personal experience. I mean, almost entirely. It was terrible. It was bad. I was really excited to tell my parents about her. Everything just blew up. And it wasn't like a formal disownment. It just sort of happened. Like, we just kind of stopped talking. And at first I would call them up and be like, hey, could you stop? And they were like, no, what are people going to say? They're really worried about losing face.
Yeah.
And after a while, we just kind of stopped talking. That is really what disownment is like. It just is this gradual drying up and falling off of communication. But it does have a happy ending, because I think my parents realized that they were not getting any younger. My mom was always more receptive of Nikki. And then one night, we overstayed our welcome at the house because my dad was coming home from work. We'd always have to leave before he came home from work, do this like crazy, almost like sitcom dance. And we were too late. He came home early, and suddenly we were smashed together, and he was incredibly kind and gracious. And I think he realized, like, I'm wasting my life over what? And who cares? And he doesn't care about going back to Korea anyway. And so I think he finally understood, like, we don't have a lot of time on this planet, and it's time to just let it all go.
How many years did that take, David?
It was about 10 years.
10 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And did you have your daughter by then?
By the time my parents like fully came around, she was like 2, I'd say. But having my daughter really accelerated things. I think that, yeah.
So how do they react to the book?
They're really proud. This is
related to... Do you think it made them uncomfortable at all? Like, you revealed some feelings or some... Oh, you don't think so?
I don't think they read it. They're not like readers. They don't read at all. They're not like... They don't read. They watch their dramas. And that's about it. And I mean, my dad passed away too, like in December, like a year and a half ago. So he didn't get to... He actually could not hold the book physically. So I showed it to him. I was like, look what I did. And he was really, really proud. At that point, he was bragging to the hospice nurses, about his son and about Nikki, his daughter-in-law. He was like, she has 2 movies based on her books. And the nurse is like, oh, wow, cool. And in the end, it took his entire life, like, to say that he was proud of me, but he did. I got that. And I feel super lucky that I got that as a kid.
Nice.
Yeah.
And your mom's still alive?
Yeah. So she moved to LA from Orange County, and she has the book. She's very proud. For her, the big moment was her friend's church's pastor wanted to bring me in for a talk. And that was bigger than the New York Times. That was bigger than NPR.
That's awesome.
I mean, your book came out last year, and you have another one coming out this year in the fall.
Actually, I just turned in copy edits. So it's in the can. It's called Super Fake Love Song. And it's about this ultra nerdy, ultra insecure kid who meets this amazing, hip, beautiful girl and immediately fakes being in a rock band to try to impress her. And, it all goes really well, and they fall in love. I'm just kidding. It all goes to hell.
Okay. is you portray these nerds, but they're not the nerds that are the stereotypical nerds. They have personality, and they're not so meek, and they have friends. Like they feel very real to me. They might be all trying to get into good schools, but they have all this other stuff going on.
Nikki is the one who actually kind of broke this down for me. She was like, everyone calls these immigrant kids like these nerdy overachievers. It's like, oh my God, they're all in the AP classes and they study so hard and get good grades. And I'm like, study hard, get good grades, get a good job as a doctor or a lawyer? Like, what the hell is wrong with that? That's achievement, man. That's like working hard and making a lot of money. That's the American dream. And when white people do it, it's just normal. When minority immigrants do it, they're suddenly nerdy overachievers. And that's the difference we're talking about. That's the difference in perception and prejudgment that we're talking about. And so I love exploding that nerdy persona and really humanizing it.
Frank is nerd, but he's cool. He's not uncool. And that, I think, is usually how nerds, that you have to be uncool.
Totally.
He's a cool kid.
But in Super Fake Love Song, my next book, he's a nerd and he's not cool. He's like
You're not an adolescent, but I feel when I read Frank, it felt so much like a teenager.
Because I'm very childish.
How would you explain that? Did you keep journals when you were a kid? How do you channel that?
I vividly remember what it was like to be in high school, like really, really vividly. And so does Nikki, for that matter. I think it's, I need to unpack that. I think it has to do with the immigrant experience, because it's time to be an adult now. Like when you're in high school, all the signals are saying it's time to be an adult. And you're just like, what does that even mean? It's hard to come up with your own definition of what being an adult means that's not based on emulating hard white stereotypes. Like carving your own identity of yourself, not as like a Korean in America and not as a white American, but something different. The hyphen in between Korean American. You're the hyphen. So what does that mean? And trying to define that as a unique identity for yourself and being proud of it and like being confident about it. Saying, no, this is who I am. The teen experience is the time when you're confronted with that challenge. When you're a kid, you just do what your parents do or whatever. It doesn't, But when you become a young adult, now it's time to figure out who you are. And especially for us immigrant kids, you have to think about your parents and you have to think about your culture. It's just inextricable. You don't have a choice.
I feel that for a lot of people or kids I know, that kind of questioning may start stirring and it may be uncomfortable in high school, but it's really in college when you start exploring and resolving some of those things. Because when you're away from your parents, you're in a new place where you can reinvent yourself. So there's a lot of conflict and questioning in high school, and then you start kind of piecing that apart in college.
Yeah, I consider like high school as the time of nonstop critique, where you're just like judging everything and weighing everything. And like you said, like in college, that's when you start becoming a little more constructive and positive. That's why like so many of my friends, including myself, like we became kind of politically active in college because we just wanted to do something about it. And then, you get a job and all that falls away. You become so many
Does it
people,
have to? What do you mean?
But so many people I know, it's like all that idealism just kind of falls away and they're just like, oh, just working. I don't know. And I think that is why adults love to read young adult books, because it reminds them of that fire, that passion of questioning everything.
Possibility. I
don't know. That makes me sad to think that when you become older and you have responsibilities possibility is there no matter age. Maybe when you start having your own kids, you start igniting some of that possibility and seeing the possibility for your child, and then now that my kids are teenagers, and I don't need to be so hands-on, there's a renewed time for me to see possibility for my own growth at this late stage. It goes in these like cycles. It's
and Nikki said, like, for everything, and I saw it happen before my very eyes. Like, she wrote that when our daughter was just born, we both realized, like, oh my God, if we're going to tell our daughter you can do anything and pursue your dreams, and we're not doing it, then that's messed up. So we were like, we have to do this. We can't. And I started playing more music. I started drawing more just because I needed to model that behavior for her. And it's paid off. I'm glad we did it, but it was a real kick in the pants.
Nicola started writing everything while she was still working in finance?
Yeah. So we just had our baby, and she was still working in finance. So that was the period when it was nonstop adrenaline, and we were getting up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Writing from 4 to about 6:30 in the morning, almost every morning. And
wow. That's crazy.
It was nuts. That was nuts.
That is crazy.
Yeah. And I worked on Frankly a little bit that way, and I also was working on my forthcoming adult book, which is coming out in.
We don't know about that yet.
Oh yeah, it's coming out in early 2021, probably January.
Is that on your website?
Yeah, it's called Version 0.
Okay.
And it's a thriller about the internet.
Cool. You've been very busy.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was sort of like my tech side kind of talking at me. But I was working on that in the early hours too. I've been working on it for a while. But yeah, it was a time when we really wanted to put our money where our mouths were, because we didn't want to be those parents who we saw it with our own parents. My mom wanted to be a chemist, and she had to give that up for us. And my dad wanted to be a poet, basically, but he also didn't want to be in poverty. And same with Nikki's parents; they had their own dreams, like that they had to leave from Jamaica when they moved here. Interesting things happen when you have kids, when your parents get old, when friends die, like interesting things happen. You realize a lot.
So in looking through your website and also your Instagram account, I really love that you've got some inventions on your website. Like you have your notebook.
Yeah.
And I was telling Catherine that when I saw this there, I thought, oh, somebody invented this. I've been thinking that this needs to be a thing. And so when I saw it here, I was really excited. It's pretty amazing to me that you have so many interests, and that it's all coming out, in different creative ways.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for mentioning the notebook. That's a baby of mine. I had this idea years ago, and I actually prototyped it myself, and I taught myself how to make notebooks in my garage, and I almost lost a few fingers in the process. And I patented it, which is, don't ever patent anything. Oh my God, don't do it. It's just a huge pain. And but it's for sale. I mean, it works, and I have a partner who owns a factory, and we talk about notebooks all day. It's great. I don't know. I just like making stuff. That's always been my free time hobby. Is I'll just sort of make stuff. Go to a restaurant and I'll just doodle. Yeah, it's
right. Like your daughter's a perfect age to make stuff with.
Oh yeah, we love making stuff or drawing, or like she's working on her own little comic books and everything, and stapling them together, which I totally love. And I always love making video games. I've been making video games since I was a little kid, programming in BASIC on my Atari. So yeah, I don't know. I just like making stuff. Making stuff is like, it's sort of what we're wired to do as people.
One thing I'm struck by is that in doing this podcast, Juliana have found there's a lot more Korean American women who are doing creative things. And I think because the men, it's not that they're not creative, but maybe they just, from a young age, they've internalized this idea that they can't explore any of these interests, you know, and that they're like, must be lawyer, must be businessman, computer, go into computer, as you put it in your book. Yeah. I love that. Right? Remember that?
Just computer.
They must do either law, medicine, or computer.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how it happened. I guess I got really lucky. My brother, too. I mean, he's really artistic, and he has a killer combination of art and tech. And he's just he's able to produce amazing work. And so, I don't know, I guess I got really lucky. But there is a lot of, like masculinity, and especially toxic masculinity, is a topic that I'm fascinated with, because it is so, it's a set of expectations that are so constricting, and that just sort of relegate our boys and men to incredibly narrow fields of employment, but also like emotional bandwidth. And especially if you have kids who are born from immigrants who are paranoid about their kids being poor or hungry, that's extra pressure on the males to be breadwinners. I don't want to judge it. I just want to explore it. I just want to see what makes that tick. And then figure out later if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I suspect it's a bad thing. I would love it if more guys were more like, you know, wear the pink shirt. It's fine. Go see a rom-com. It's fine. But I really want to explore that next, I think.
Yeah, it's really refreshing to see a male character for YA novels in romance, you know, the male perspective.
Yeah, thanks. That meant a lot to me too. It's very important to me to have, especially a Korean American guy who was very romantic, you know. So that means a lot.
Is Nicola there? Will she come in and pop her head into the Zoom? Would she do that for us?
I don't know. She's kind of still in her PJs.
Is she dressed?
All right, fine.
Yeah.
Little wave. Okay.
Yeah. But she just popped her head and like, are you guys still talking? And then
yeah.
All right.
You know, I have to say, when I heard you two at Barnes & Noble's in New York last year, it was like, I just left there thinking, could they be sweeter, kinder, lovelier people? Oh my God, their relationship is so sweet and adorable, but like so encouraging. And I just thought, man, you know, like, I know it's work, but how beautiful for you two. It's really just really lovely to see.
I count my blessings every day. I really do. You know, she'll read like Red, White, and Royal Blue, and she's like, you need to read this. And so I'll read just to catch up, just so we can talk about it. And I feel really lucky that we have that relationship, that we most of the time we talk about art. And that was always my dream anyway. Was to surround myself in art, and I kind of have it. So like, I don't know, I'm eternally grateful. It was kind of tough getting here, but we're here, and it's great.
That was great. Yeah. Perfect ending too.
Yeah, thanks you guys. And
all right,
let's do it again.
Yes.
It was so much fun.
Thanks,
it was so
David.
much fun. Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, you guys take care too. Be safe, okay?
K-Pod is a production of KoreanAmericanStory.org. Our editor is AJ Valente. Our producer is Jessica Park, and our executive producer is HJ Lee. You can follow K-Pod and see Juliana's photographs of our subjects on our new Instagram at KPodPod. That's KPODPOD. And you can always email us with comments and suggestions at kpod@KoreanAmericanStory.org. Thanks.